Sorry. It's not on?
Hello. Yeah, that's all right.
Now it's on?
Yep.
Okay. I won't read it. So it's nice to welcome Jennifer Steinkamp, whose work with 3D, with installations, with audio, also international shows of her work, and interesting collaborations and consulting with a series of, this part I will read, which is clients such as U2, DreamWorks, Sony ImageWorks, Alias Wavefront, Reverb, Disney Imagineering, Imagineering, and Virgin Records. So I give you Jennifer Steinkamp.
Great. Oh, thanks for having me. And there's a... Oh, we can... We're getting a delay through this. That's just like the radio. It's like a call-in show on the radio or something. Turn down your radio. Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to start by showing my videotape and kind of talk over that. So I guess we'll kill the lights and start the tape. Maybe. I think that's a start. Oh, yeah. Okay. It was set up. Oh. Yep. Okay, this is the first installation I did with animation, and it was sort of an undergraduate piece. And I was doing it at this house in Pasadena, and through this through a foundation called FAR, it ended up at the Santa Monica Museum as well. And let's see, this piece, it's, one image projected on the floor twice, and this was important for me because I realized I could use projection to dematerialize architecture, so that the space actually had this sort of layer, another perspective over it. I think we could turn down the audio a little, maybe, or I can move this away. So people actually felt seasick when they experienced this piece, and I thought that was pretty incredible that you could have a physical sensation from light which is non-physical. And this piece starts a long collaboration with a composer named Jimmy Johnson. We've probably worked on over 20 pieces together. And this was part of an exhibition on photography. There was a symposium and an exhibition. And I guess I was, I mean, it's hard to consider myself a photographer, so I kind of, I guess I was like on some real extreme of what photography might be. The piece actually did reference ideas of photography. Like it was 3 intersecting landscapes, and I used ideas of focus. And let's see, this is at Oberlin College. There's this little balcony inside of this nice big space which was built around the turn of the century. And I put up a rear screen in front of it. And it's a piece that alternates figure and ground. So it's, you know, a lot of my ideas come from painting. So the idea of figure and ground. So with animation or motion, you can traverse between something being a background, and then as it comes close, it's a background. As it pulls away, it's an object. And then this piece of projectors are mounted high, so they're hitting the floor and the wall. It's one image twice and flipped. And it's also alternating backgrounds. I sort of gave it a waistline sort of feel. And I use 3D computer graphics to calculate how the projections will fit into the space, so I can kind of predetermine, how it's going to work. This one I put up in New York, and when I mocked it up at home at about third scale, I actually had intended to put this strip hitting the floor and this strip over here hitting this wall. But when I got to New York and set it up, that idea just did not work. So through serendipity, the piece became this, which I actually like kind of better anyways. So it's one of those things. It's when you work with projection, it's sort of a continual learning process. Because every time I do a piece, I learn something new, either about projection or how the audience interacts with it. This piece is a somewhat cubistic piece. It's multiple points of view put together in one scene. What I did is I make a large seascape, and then I'll have a camera in the software that looks up, one that looks down, and 3 to the sides. And so I create 5 different animations that I then map into the inside of a cube. And then I move the camera looking in this cube. So what you end up with is this sort of cubic wide-angle lens kind of thing. This is the same image twice and overlapping. And this one I learned that I could interlace the viewer into the work, because the viewer shadow has always been an important aspect of the work, because the viewer becomes a part of the work. And in this case, that idea becomes accentuated because you're interlaced into the work. And the projectors are extreme angles, so that's why it's distorted. And I did this at Art Center so I could run from the computer lab up to this space, sort of back and forth, so I could get these things to align. So otherwise there wouldn't be any other way to do this piece. This one was purchased by the Museum of Contemporary Art, and they've shown it twice now, which is incredible to me, because it's a rather big piece. It's basically the same animation twice. One's horizontal, one's vertical, one's front projected, and then one's rear projected. That's why you can see that shadow over on the other side, but not the body. And it's a camera flying through a field of particles. And I worked with a composer named Brian Brown on this one. This is another one where the viewer's shadow is interlaced. Use the same image twice, but one's just shifted to the left and one's to the right, and one's shifted up a little bit so that the stripes interweave a little bit. And so the projectors are at angles. That pole in the middle of the room determined the piece, really, because I really didn't want to be hitting that pole, so I put the projectors at angles. So as you walk through, your shadow becomes filled with stripes from the other side. This is using, a lot of the pieces use a software called Particles. And I like Particles because you never really know what you're going to end up with. Because what you do is give them a lifespan, tell them what color to be over their life. You set up environmental variables like gravity or wind or whatever, and you just sort of let this thing run as a simulation. And it usually takes overnight. And then you see what it does the next day. They decide whether or not to keep it. So it's this one was just purchased for a children's museum in Belfast, so I get to go there at the end of this year, which I'm really excited about. It's 2 projections overlapping at angles, so you get 2 shadows. But I turned down the color on one of the projectors, so you get a black and white shadow and a color shadow. And they asked me to do their information booth. I'd done an information booth at Union Station as an early work, which is not on this reel anymore. And this is called Information About Comets, and it's kind of what would happen if a comet were trapped inside of a cube. So the cube is formed and then unformed by these particles. And I'd love to make this piece in particular interactive, so as you walk by, the perspective shifts. And I think that would be a nice effect for it someday. This one, working with clockwise and counterclockwise. So there's two layers of projections. One's counterclockwise, one's clockwise. One's warm colors and cool colors. So your shadow ends up being the opposite of the image. This is a little corner piece. It's about 1.5 feet, and it's shifting between 1-point and 2-point perspective. And it really feels like a sculpture when you see it, or it has this dimensional quality because it's projected into the corner. And it sort of shakes nervously as well. And it's kind of an homage to one of my favorite artists, Robert Irwin, or not Robert Irwin, God, James Turrell. It's a good slip. Actually, Irwin's not one of my favorite artists. Hello. This is another one with layers. There's a slow layer and a fast layer, and warm, cool. And this one's kind of an homage to Jackson Pollock, or inspired by, anyways. And this one you could see at night, and then during the day, this awning would fold down and cover the window. And that's the guy who built the awning. It's kind of silly. And this is 2 layers. There's sort of snow going up layer, and then the clouds riding on. And this is directly influenced by the movie City of Lost Children, with that green smoke going through the city effect. I kind of thought it's sort of like what would happen if a bunch of skywriters got together and made an art piece. That's probably the most narrative piece, because it has a beginning and an end to each of the trails. Oh God, I don't know. I've done 4 so far this year. I think 4 pieces. It was about 6. It depends on how many people ask me. I always do commissions. This was in an architectural office. It is actually the least architectural piece I've done to date, probably. It's a piece of foam core suspended in the middle of the hallway. Their office, with all the walls were so overdetermined and used up, or there was really nowhere to project. It was kind of crazy. This is another corner piece. This one, when you walked into the room, it really felt like a sculpture. And it's actually very short. Well, they're all pretty short, but this one especially is very short, but you can watch it for a long time, and you'll see new sort of optical effects as you continually watch it, because of the changes in speed and the more ray patterns and the shifting in color. And also as you walk around it, things sort of happen. So. I also collaborate with a performance group called Micro International. I feel like I need this thing. The dancers are wearing video cameras that are reprojecting onto the walls. It was about a 20-minute performance at Site Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this is just an excerpt from the performance, or actually from the rehearsal. Well, let's see. This piece has a couple different perspectives in one image, although you might not really realize that. The soundtrack is from the seduction scene of The Graduate. We just took it. Andrew Buxberg is the composer for this. He took the soundtrack and slowed it way down. And the song's called Sun Porch Cha-Cha-Cha. This is the piece. The exhibition was called Ultra Lounge. We decided to use this cocktail music, distorted, in response to the theme of the show. And this piece is kind of a collage. It's more or less the same animation collage throughout the space. You'll see what I mean. And this sound was just outdoors. There was some helicopter or something flying by, but I thought it went with the piece, so I left it on there. Because really any ambient sound kind of becomes part of the work too. So I was working at DreamWorks when I did this, and DreamWorks, they do a lot of 2D animation, but use 3D computer graphics for a lot of their effects. And so they do a lot of sort of 2D, 3D sorts of things. So I was inspired to try something like that. And so it's basically each water strip is cut and pasted together. And then there's a projection on the side, which is also pasted into the space. So it's sort of a collage in a collage and a collage in the space. And this is the wall on the opposite side. I got a lot of comments about how painterly that piece was. This piece has begun this. I've started adding to the architecture. So we built these 3 wall strips. They're about 5 inches thick. They're drywall. And there's a projector mounted back here, hitting that back wall, and the images are tilting a little bit, so the architecture feels a little, destabilized. And it was curious to me when people came into this piece, they could not negotiate that wall. It was mysterious. Because it's sort of a half wall, they just couldn't figure it out. It's strange. This one, I built a column in the middle of the door. This is a very short space in London, and projectors need a long space. So it was a pretty tricky one to work with. It is the same image projected twice. And I used mirrors to lengthen the space as well. And we added a little blue light in the hallway. And there's some displaced sound in another room, which doesn't come across on the documentation at all. And this is particles kind of moving down a spiral that's kind of wiggling. And I sort of thought of it as a Mercury telephone cord, kind of. And the funny thing that happened at the opening here is when people walked in the room, they couldn't leave. It's like they were trapped. And I think part of it's because the images are like bars. And the other thing is when you leave, you become part of the art piece. So it was sort of, if you know the movie Exterminating Angel by Buñuel, where all the people are trapped in a chateau. It was really kind of like that. It was funny. And this is my first interactive piece. There's this balcony that's curved, and we suspended this screen along that. So making the hallway more of a hallway, because there's a space on the other side. So you could see this piece from the hallway and from that room. They put sensors down the hallway so it would change the speed as you walk by. And there's sensors in this room that change the colors, make the image turbulent, and also stop the image. And if you just stare at this, don't blink, because you'll see a really cool effect. You see that? Where the image seems like it's moving upwards? Maybe. And now you can see why children's museums buy the work. Kids really have a lot of fun. I mean, you don't have to show them Barney, to entertain them. It was a good lesson for me. And this is a permanent piece at the Staples Center. There's three different bits. And it plays in the evening for events. When they were first designing the building, they asked me over and said, what would you like to do here? And I just looked at this huge, daunting building and saw this little, it was just going to be a grid. It wasn't even a room before. I thought, well, maybe we should put some projection in there on the point. And so after a year, it happened. So. And here's another corner piece. This gallery, this was this year, this gallery has a 45-degree angle, so I just had to try it. And the curator, Dave Hickey, he painted all the walls taupe, so he painted up to here, so that actually created a big limitation for me, or what I could really do with it.
What did he think of the piece, Hickey?
Oh, he liked it a lot. Yeah, he's a big supporter. Well, he was the curator. He couldn't write about it. He has written about me before. And he's putting me in the Site Santa Fe Biennial next year. And so, yeah, he's... This just came down. This is another interactive piece up at Art Center. Each monolith goes from floor to ceiling. They each have 6 speakers inside of them. There's sensors on the wall. So as you approach the monolith, the image speeds up. And when you get close enough, it'll arc like that. And then there's some sensors at the ends of the gallery that make them all arc together in a chorus. So you can see this one speeding up. I need a steady cam someday. So I think they're going to arc any day. So Sarah Rosenbaum. They're each QuickTime movies that are just changing speed as the sensor input's sent into Director.
How many projectors you have?
There's 6 projectors, but each projector projects 2 images. And there's 6 computers as well, so each computer controls 2 images. So this piece was really determined by, well, the budget, how many projectors and computers they had, and of course the space. So sort of all these factors, I guess those are always the factors anyways. But. Then I wanted to show you a preview of upcoming events. I was awarded Fremont Street in Las Vegas. And the music is by Roger Borland. And so he's going to be writing some, he's the head of the electronic music department here at UCLA. He's going to be writing the music for this. So this was part of my proposal to them. So it's a simulation. I haven't really made anything there yet. So it's 90 feet high, 3 blocks long. It's really, it's such a beautiful piece of architecture. It's really dramatic. And So I have to have that done by September somehow.
Did you get this condition?
I did, yes. So that's the end of the tape.
Should I bring the letter?